Well, Iran is dealing with the pandemic of coronavirus as it's also dealing with rising human rights issues. Iran has been one of the hardest hit countries from the pandemic. According to Johns Hopkins University, the country has over 94,000 cases of COVID-19 and at least 6,000 deaths. Behnam Ben Taleblu is a senior fellow at the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies. He joins me now from Washington. Behnam, how exactly has Iran been dealing with the coronavirus pandemic?
Rena, great to be with you. Hope you're healthy and safe. The long and short answer is not well. The Islamic Republic of Iran has botched the response when it comes to the coronavirus crisis. If you remember earlier in February, it downplayed, if not neglected it. And then finally, once it admitted it, it resorted to tried and true methods, pointing a finger abroad for problems at home. Despite the virus coming from the East, Iran engaged in all sorts of conspiratorial tropes, talking about it coming from the West, rejecting American aid, even kicking out a very famous non-governmental organization, Medicine Sans Frontier, because they were reportedly building a field hospital in a city that Iran was also looking to build a field hospital in. So they've botched it. It's likely that the numbers that Johns Hopkins University has, which is our official figures, are several-fold probably higher. Even members of Iran's own parliament doesn't believe the official statistics right now.
Mm-hmm. Even before this, we were talking about the issue of human rights in Iran. How has coronavirus exacerbated what we're seeing when it comes to the human rights front there?
Well, there's several fronts on the human rights file that are actually being exacerbated by this coronavirus crisis or COVID-19. One, of course, is the terrible situation within Iran's prisons. That has been deplorable before we even dealt with the coronavirus crisis. While some prisoners have been able to be furloughed or sent home for different periods of time for up to 2 weeks, and of course there was the Persian New Year holiday that was celebrated, where certain prisoners, particularly high-profile foreign ones, one or two, were able to be sent home temporarily. Otherwise, it's been pretty bad, especially when you come to Iran's periphery regions, where you have both ethnic and religious minorities that reside on the border provinces. Those were already under-resourced areas. So if you were already a second-class citizen, whether you were an ethnic minority, a religious minority, living on the geographic and literal periphery of Iranian society, as well as a prisoner, you were very hard hit by the crisis. But that doesn't mean that ordinary Iranians of all stripes, too, haven't suffered, because they have. While there was one epicenter initially in the holy city of Qom, because Iran did not do a proper lockdown and no quarantine of that city, the virus really has spread everywhere. And when it comes to official death figures, Iran remains the Middle Eastern epicenter for this virus.
It's interesting you say they are the Middle Eastern epicenter for the coronavirus. We don't hear a lot about it. But on top of this, they were looking to get some sort of an indefinite weapons ban. Do you think this is going to sort of escalate the tensions between the U.S. and Iran at this point?
The coronavirus crisis hasn't masked the larger strategic competition between the U.S. and Iran. And something that's really a shame is that Iran is continuing to use time, money, attention, particularly at the highest levels of government, on continuing to export its revolution abroad, continuing to underwrite escalation by Iraqi proxies and Shia militias elsewhere, continuing to actually support the Houthis in Yemen. In a 4-month period from November to February, there were at least 2 interceptions of Iranian weapons going to Yemen. Iran has, through trade networks, through tourism networks, and through terrorism networks, actually inadvertently spread this virus to other parts of the Middle East. And most unfortunately, Iran is not just engaging in repression abroad and aggression abroad and repression at home, but is continuing to stockpile low-enriched uranium. There were reports, I think in February or March, about having at least 1 bomb's worth of low-enriched uranium. So every issue that has remained with Iran has not gone away. In fact, it's only been temporarily masked, and it tells you what priorities the government in Iran has. Because as it's suffering from this crisis, it's continuing to do all the things that have made and sustained it the world's foremost state sponsor of terrorism.
Behnam Ben Taleblu, grateful you could join us, Behnam, with an update on outlook in the Middle East. Thank you.
Thank you so much.